You think silence is weakness. You believe that not speaking up makes you invisible, forgettable, a ghost in the room, while others command attention with their words. But what if I told you that every time you rush to fill the void with noise, you're handing away the only weapon that could make you truly untouchable? Machiavelli understood something. Most people spend their entire lives never grasping power. Doesn't announce itself. It waits, it watches, and it strikes when the room has already forgotten it's there. Let me show you what's really happening when you speak. Right now, in this moment, you're being trained by society to broadcast everything. Your thoughts, your plans, your emotions, your reactions. Social media rewards the loudest voice. Conversations reward the quickest wit. Job interviews reward rehearsed confidence. But here's the trap. Every word you speak is a thread someone else can pull. Every opinion you share is a map to your vulnerabilities. Every reaction you give is a window into what moves you, what threatens you, what controls you, and the people who truly hold power. They're not the ones talking. They're the ones listening while you dismantle yourself one sentence at a time. Machiavelli wrote about this in The Prince, but not in the way most people read it. Everyone focuses on his lessons about cruelty and cunning, but they miss the silence woven between those lessons. He observed that the most dangerous rulers were those whose intentions remained unreadable, whose thoughts stayed locked behind expressions that revealed nothing. When you cannot predict someone, you cannot prepare for them. When you cannot decode their next move, you exist in a perpetual state of disadvantage. Silence is not the absence of power, it is power concentrated into its most threatening form. It's a loaded gun that never needs to be fired because the possibility of its firing is enough. Think about the last argument you had. You felt compelled to defend yourself, didn't you? Someone said something that struck a nerve, and immediately you opened your mouth to correct them, to explain, to justify. That impulse, that burning need to respond, is the leash around your neck. Because in that moment, you revealed exactly what hurts you. You showed them which button to press next time. You gave them the ammunition they'll use against you forever. The person who stays silent during that exchange, they learn everything while giving away nothing. They watch you exhaust yourself, expose your reasoning, lay bare your emotional triggers. And when you're done, when you've said everything you needed to say, they know you completely while you know them not at all. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that's better to be feared than loved. But fear doesn't come from violence or intimidation. Real fear comes from uncertainty. When people don't know what you're thinking, they fill the void with their own paranoia. They project their worst fears onto your silence. They imagine scenarios far worse than anything you could actually say or do. Your silence becomes a mirror for their insecurities, and they defeat themselves trying to interpret what isn't there. You become whatever they fear most simply by saying nothing at all. But let's go deeper, because there's a psychological mechanism at work here that most people never see. It's called the spotlight effect. And it's the cognitive bias that makes you believe everyone is paying attention to you, analyzing your every move, judging your every word. This illusion drives you to over-explain, to fill silences with nervous chatter, to prove yourself constantly. But here's what's actually happening. Nobody is thinking about you as much as you think they are. When you speak to fill that perceived void, you're not meeting some social obligation, you're creating one. You're forcing people to process information they weren't even asking for. And in doing so, you're making yourself easier to categorize, easier to dismiss, easier to forget. The silent person breaks this pattern entirely. They violate the social script. When everyone else is competing for airtime, the one who withholds their voice becomes the anomaly. And anomalies are impossible to ignore. Your brain is wired to detect patterns and deviations. The person who speaks predictably becomes part of the background noise. The person who speaks sparingly becomes the signal everyone tunes into when they finally do break their silence. Now, I need you to understand something crucial here, because this is where most people misapply this principle and destroy themselves in the process. Silence is not sulking. It's not passive aggression. It's not withdrawing into some wounded, victimized shell where you punish others by withholding communication. That's just another form of noise. It's broadcasting your hurt feelings without using words. Strategic silence is different. It's active, not passive. It's observation, not isolation. You're not absent from the interaction. You're hyper-aware within it. You're reading the room while everyone else is trying to impress the room. You're cataloging information, spotting contradictions, identifying power dynamics, all while others assume your silence means you have nothing to contribute. Machiavelli observed the courts of Renaissance Italy, where one wrong word could end your life. In that environment, the verbose politicians didn't last long. They made enemies by speaking carelessly, revealing alliances prematurely, or offending the wrong person with an ill-timed joke. The survivors weren't the most eloquent. They were the most economical with their words. They spoke only when their words could change the outcome, and they stayed silent when speaking would only expose their hand. This principle hasn't changed in 500 years. Your workplace, your relationships, your social circles, they're all courts where information is currency, and loose lips destroy more careers than incompetence ever could. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet, and this is the part that will separate you from everyone who thinks they understand this concept. Silence doesn't just protect you, it transforms you. When you stop filling every moment with your voice, something shifts in your psychology. You stop being reactive. Your identity stops depending on external validation. You're no longer performing for an audience, because you've eliminated the need for applause. This internal shift radiates outward in ways you can't fake. People sense it. They feel the difference between someone who's quiet because they're afraid and someone who's quiet because they've transcended the need to prove anything. Think about the most powerful people you've encountered in your life. Not the loudest, not the most charismatic, the most powerful. Chances are they didn't dominate conversations. They asked questions. They listened with intensity that made you feel seen. And when they spoke, their words carried weight because they were rare. Every sentence felt considered, deliberate, heavy with meaning. You remembered what they said because they didn't dilute their message with constant chatter. This is the weaponization of scarcity. Your words become valuable only when they're scarce. Your presence becomes magnetic only when it's not guaranteed. Now let's talk about what happens in the silence, the space between words that most people desperately try to eliminate. This is where the real warfare occurs. When you're comfortable with silence, you force others to fill it. And when people rush to fill silence, they reveal themselves, they over-explain, they justify, they confess, they negotiate against themselves. Police interrogators know this. Therapists know this. Master negotiators know this. The person who can sit in uncomfortable silence and not break first controls the entire interaction. Your discomfort with silence is a weakness others will exploit the moment they recognize it. Your comfort with silence is a weapon that turns every conversation into a confessional where others volunteer information you never even asked for. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." Your silence is the gap between those two realities. What you appear to be, calm, collected, mysterious, perhaps even cold, is the armor that protects what you really are. And what you really are should be known to so few people that it becomes almost impossible to attack. Every secret you share is a hostage someone can take. Every opinion you broadcast is a target someone can aim for. Every emotional reaction you display is a pattern someone can predict and manipulate. The less you give them, the more invincible you become. But let me show you where this gets truly dark, because we're approaching territory most self-help gurus will never touch. When you master silence, you begin to see the world differently. You notice how much of human interaction is just ritual, meaningless exchanges that people engage in because they're terrified of the alternative. Small talk becomes transparent. You see it for what it is, a mutual agreement to avoid anything real, anything uncomfortable, anything that might demand genuine thought or emotion. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll watch people circle around important topics, dancing at the edge of honesty, but never quite arriving there. You'll witness conversations where everyone is performing a version of themselves they think others want to see, and you'll realize that most people are so busy broadcasting that they've forgotten how to receive. This awareness gives you a choice. You can use your silence to make others comfortable, asking the right questions, giving them space to feel heard, building trust through attentive presence. Or you can use your silence to make others uncomfortable, withholding validation, refusing to fill awkward pauses, letting their nervousness amplify until they say things they never intended to reveal. Both are forms of power. Both are weapons. The difference is your intent. Machiavelli would tell you that morality is a luxury of the weak. That power is immoral. That results matter more than methods. But I'm going to tell you something he wouldn't. The most dangerous practitioners of silence are those who use it with surgical precision, choosing when to comfort and when to unsettle, reading each situation clearly enough to know which approach serves their purpose. Here's what I want you to try, and this is where theory becomes practice. The next time you're in a group conversation, don't speak, not because you're shy or anxious, but as an experiment. Watch what happens. Notice who tries to pull you in. Notice who gets uncomfortable with your silence. Notice who speaks more because you're speaking less. Notice how the dynamics shift when one person opts out of the competition for attention. You'll discover something fascinating. Your value in that conversation doesn't decrease with your silence. It increases. People will start directing comments toward you, seeking your approval, wondering what you're thinking. Your silence creates a vacuum that others rush to fill, and in filling it, they elevate you without you doing anything at all. But there is something even more dangerous we need to address before we reach the end, and this is the part that will haunt you long after this video ends. Silence is dangerous because it forces you to confront yourself. When you stop using conversation as a distraction, when you stop performing your identity through constant self-narration, you're left alone with your thoughts. And for most people, that's terrifying. The noise they generate isn't really for others. It's for themselves. They talk to avoid thinking. They broadcast to avoid reflecting. They fill every moment with sound because silence would force them to face questions they've been running from their entire lives. Who am I without an audience? What do I actually believe versus what I've been told to believe? What am I avoiding? What am I afraid of? Machiavelli's Florence was a place where silence could save your life, but it was also a place where silence could drive you mad. Exile was a common punishment, and in exile, cut off from the political theater that gave life meaning, many men discovered they were hollow. They'd spent so long playing roles that they'd forgotten who existed beneath the performance. Your silence will either reveal a core of steel or a void where a self should be. This is why most people will never truly embrace this weapon, not because they don't understand its power, but because they're afraid of what they'll find when the noise stops. So here's the final truth, the one that brings everything together. Silence is dangerous not because of what it does to others, but because of what it demands from you. It requires you to be comfortable with yourself, to have an internal world rich enough that you don't need constant external stimulation. It requires you to develop real thoughts rather than borrowed opinions, genuine confidence rather than performed bravado, actual presence rather than anxious self-monitoring. Most people can't do this. They're too addicted to the validation hit that comes from being heard, too dependent on others' reactions to know how they should feel. They'll mistake your silence for weakness because it's the only interpretation that lets them sleep at night. The alternative, that you're operating on a level they haven't reached, is too threatening to acknowledge. You're going to leave this video, and the world is going to test you immediately. Someone will say something designed to provoke you. Your instinct will be to respond, to defend, to correct, to engage. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. You can give them the reaction they're fishing for, or you can give them nothing. You can hand them the thread they need to unravel you, or you can watch them struggle against a wall they can't climb. Remember, the person who needs to speak is always weaker than the person who chooses to. Need is weakness. Choice is power. Every time you open your mouth, ask yourself, is this word necessary, or am I just uncomfortable with silence? Because at the end of everything, here's what separates the powerful from the powerless. The powerful understand that not every provocation deserves a response, not every question deserves an answer, and not every silence needs to be filled. You think silence is weakness, but now you know better. Silence is the most dangerous weapon you possess, and the moment you learn to wield it, you'll never be as vulnerable as you were before. The room doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the one who knows when to speak and when to let the silence do the work. Now you have that knowledge. The question is, are you strong enough to use it?